Hello everyone. Eyes are the windows to the soul, and if you want to make your games more soulful, what better way to enhance them than with realistic eyes? This technique takes a procedural approach to painting your eyeballs. While you could do a lot of this with just a texture map, a procedural approach lets you have an infinite amount of resolution and make adjustments to your eyes at game time. Okay, let's start by creating our mesh. First, let's delete the default cube, and now let's create a new UV sphere, and we're going to rotate this on the x-axis by 90 degrees so that the pole of that sphere is now pointing straight down the y-axis. So this is going to be the front of our eye right here. Now, the eye has a cornea that surrounds it, so let's create that by duplicating our base eye and press S to scale up a little bit. And if we turn on X-ray mode, we can actually see through that a little bit. And let's rename that to cornea. And let's hide that for now. We'll get back to it later. Let's turn off X-ray mode and get the eyeball, and let's rename this to eyeball so we know what it is. Okay, so now this is the basic sphere we're going to turn into an eyeball. Now, if we look at an anatomy chart of an eye, we can see that while the cornea does puff out a little bit right here, the eye itself is a little bit flattened in the front. So we're going to flatten out the front of our eyeball as well. So let's go into edit mode. Let's add in an extra loop right here. And we're then going to select these loops and pull them in. Let's press 3 to go to side view. Shift Z to go into wireframe mode, and let's just pull these in a little bit, and we're going to create a little bit of a satellite dish. Shape with the points of our eye. And this is like a little bit extreme, but it has the effect of giving us a little bit of a parallax view when we look at the eye. Let's smooth shade that. And smooth, and let's bevel these edges so they're not quite so sharp. I'm going to select that ring and then Control B for bevel, and give that another division, and same thing for up here. Okay, so there is our basic inner eye. Now we need to put UV texturing on this. We're going to start by splitting our eye into two pieces, the front part and the back part. So let's put a ring around there, and Control E to mark a seam. Now we're going to go into 3 for face mode and press L. And this way we've just selected all the back back faces, and press P to separate by selection, and now we can see our eye has two different parts. And let's name the back part eyeball back. Okay, now let's UV texture these. Let's go to the UV editing tab. We're going to press A to select all the faces there, and U to unwrap. And this isn't quite so important for the back of the eye, but for the front of the eye, I'm going to press A to select everything. Whoops. A to select everything, U to unwrap. I think I pressed I by mistake there. And we now have a nice 1-by-1 mapping of all the vertices on our eye. And this is going to be just what we want for the procedural shader later on, because we don't have to worry about resolution. We don't have to worry about this middle bit being overly pinched, because our shader is going to have as much resolution as we want, and this isn't going to be an issue. Okay, we're nearly done with the base eyeball, but we do need to fix one more thing. If we go back into layout mode, we can see that there is a visible seam between the front and the back parts. And if we turn off the Okay, not the outline selected, the outline here, to get rid of that line that Blender automatically draws on the edges of shapes. You can still see there's a visible partition here. This is because Blender is automatically recalculating the normals, and when we split this mesh into two pieces, Blender now doesn't know what to do with the normals on the edge. But we can fix this. What we're going to do is make a duplicate of these two pieces and press Ctrl J to merge them together again. Now if we go into edit mode, we can press A to select all and M to merge by distance. You can see what this did is it just gave us back our original mesh, which is basically what this was before we split into two pieces. And I'm going to press Alt G to put that back in the center, and let's press F2 to name that eyeball original. Now, you can see that with our original eyeball, the UVs are as we want them. And with our split eyeball, the UVs are messed up. So we're going to use a data transfer modifier in order to copy the UVs from, not the UVs, the normals from this object to this one. So I can press Alt G to put that back in the center. And let's even just hide that for now. We're going to select our front eyeball, come here to modifiers, add modifier, edit data transfer. The source is going to be the eyeball original, and we're going to click on face corner data and custom normals. And if you saw that, it was subtle, but the normals on the edge were recalculated because now those normals are coming from the original mesh, not being automatically calculated by Blender. One other thing I should mention, click on this little data thing here and make sure that under normals, make sure that auto smooth is on, because this will not work if auto smooth is not on. We're going to do the same, and you can see that that division line is a little bit softer. Let's do the same thing with our back here. Again, auto smooth is on. Let's come back here to the modifiers, add modifier, edit data transfer. Source is going to be the eyeball original, and we're going to click on face corner data and custom normals. And now you see that seam has now completely gone because we're now using the UV, not the UVs, we're now using the normals from the original eyeball, not from the cut eyeball. One more thing, I'm going to go over here and turn off the render flag for the eyeball original model. Not that we're going to be rendering this, but when we run the exporter to a GLB file, I'm going to select the flag that is going to exclude everything that has the render flag set off. In fact, let's turn that off for the light and the camera as well. This is just an easier way to export our model when we get to that step and not include all the models we want. All right, so the eyeball is good at this point. Let's focus on the cornea. Let's turn that back on. And let's make that smooth. And now let's puff out that front a little bit. Again, let's add in another loop. And let's go into edge mode. And select these inner edges. And let's just bring them out a little bit. And I'm going to press Shift-Z to go into X-ray view. Don't have to bring them out a lot, just a little bit. Let's press Ctrl B to put a bit of a seam there. Let's maybe scale that out a little bit. Okay, that looks good. Oh, maybe a little bit too much. Let's bring in a little bit. Anyway, just play around with this until it looks good to you. And great. Okay. We now have all the pieces of our eyeball mesh. Let's export them. And yeah, if I just press G, I can move it to the side. I'll press Alt G to move it back again. Just a quick check to make sure that everything is here and in the right place. Okay, and let's export it to our program. Just come down here to export, down to GLTF, and we can set our parameters here. We're going to go to Data, Mesh, Apply Modifiers. This is going to make sure that that data transfer modifier is applied to your exported mesh. And let's remember the export settings so that we don't have to redo this each time. And under include, we're going to limit to renderable objects. So this way, we're not going to export our original mesh because we don't want that. We're just using that as the source to get our normals from. Once we've done all this, we can export GLTF, and we're ready to start using our mesh in Blender. Okay, now that we have our mesh exported, we can start creating a material for it in Godot. You can see I've already created a new project, and I've created a scene with a light in it, which we'll be using to highlight reflections. And here is the eyeball mesh that we exported. So let's click and drag that into our scene. And we can position that at the origin. We'll just erase the transform there. And there's our mesh. And you can see it, the cornea is opaque and it's right on top of everything else, so we can't see the inner eye. Well, let's fix that. Let's right click on eyeball and come down here to editable children. And now we can see the three parts it's made out of. Let's start by making that cornea transparent so that we can see through it. Well, we can do that by adding in one of our special shader materials. So make sure cornea is selected over here. Come over to your Mesh Instance 3D, and we're going to open this, and we're going to create an override material on it. Click Empty and down to New Shader Material. Click on that to open it, and you can see we have a slot here for our shader. So let's come over here to Cornea Shader and drag that right over. And you can see our cornea seemed to disappear, but it didn't completely disappear. It has been replaced with a very simple glass shader, and you can sort of see the specular highlight on it right there. In fact, if I turn off the other parts of our eye model, you can see that little glassy glint on the surface. And because this is sort of a cartoonish eye, we just want a very nice highlight on the cornea. We don't need it to be doing anything else. All right, so that's the cornea taken care of. How about the eyeball itself? Well, we're going to do something similar. Click on the eyeball, which if you remember is just this front portion here. And click on the material override. We're going to create a new shader material there. Click on that to open it up. And now we're going to drag the eyeball shader across. And you can see it starts out with our eyeball divided into the three major sections: the eye white, the sclera, I think it's called, the pupil in the middle, and the iris halfway in between the two. Now, if we look at the shader properties over here, we can customize this to give us a more detailed idea of what's going on here. We can open this up, and we see the iris radius. We can move this back and forth to change how big that outer ring is. The iris margin, which gives us a little bit of thickness on that very edge of the eye. The pupil radius, which will shrink or contract the middle bit. And the eye white and the pupil color, you can change this to a different color if you want to. But we'll leave it at white because that's the most common color. And now we can come down to the iris, which is probably the part that we focus most on when we're looking at an eye. And this is set up so that you can add in a gradient. Let's try making a green eye. Let's click on Iris Texture and come down here to Gradient Texture 1D. And you can see already we have a cellular pattern for the inside of our eye. And let's dial the eye radius back down again so that that black ring is right on the edge where we start to dip in for the iris. Now we can edit the iris color to match the color of our eye. So let's click on this slider. Let's give that, make that a little bit darker, a little bit more saturated, sort of a greenish yellow for the light part of the eye, and we can click on this stop, and we can make that a little bit lighter and make that sort of a dark green. And already this is starting to look like an eye. And this mesh pattern on the inside, this is called a Voronoi tessellation, and it's meant to imitate the cells that are visible when you look at the iris. And let's see. And this is looking decent the way it is, although we can play with this a little bit more. If we open the iris properties, we can change the number of octaves that we're using. The octave is the how many times this pattern repeats itself. So by default, this is going to be at 1. So you only have one cellular pattern displayed here. But if we put that up to 2, you can see that it's just overlaid a weaker version of it on top of the stronger one. In fact, you can change the weightedness in order to affect just how strong that second pattern is on top of it. And we could go up, we could add in a third octave if we wanted to for even finer cell grain. But I think 2 is plenty. This will keep our shader nice and fast. And that gives us sort of a nice, sort of scattered cell pattern. Although it's a little bit too dense now, so we can come up to our iris color and just add in an extra stop and play with that until the gradient is where we want it to be. I think that looks good for now. Okay, so now we have a pretty basic eye all set up, but we can add in something else. We can add in a bit of a highlight ring on the inside here using color dodge. And all this is doing is it's going to add a new gradient to our eye. Let's make this a 1D gradient texture. And you can see right now, this gradient is going to be applied from the pupil up to the sclera here. And by default, it's going to dodge it. So we're going to want to add in an extra stop here, set that back to black. And okay, you can see as we move this middle stop back and forth, that changes the center of the highlight. And that's a little bit too strong. Let's bring that down a little bit. So it almost starts to fade out. And let's add in the second stop so we can make this a little bit wider. And that's looking better, although you can see there's a bit of a sharp line where it starts and stops there. So let's change the interpolation down to cubic so it's a lot smoother. And there you have a nice highlight in the middle of the ring of the eye. In fact, we can make that a little bit bigger and maybe a little bit brighter. And you can just play around with that until you get the values that you want. Now, there's one more thing that we can add. We just added the dodge ring, which gives us this nice highlight in the middle, but we probably also want to darken the edges too, and that's what the multiply ring is for. In fact, if I move that out a little bit, you can read these labels a little bit better. This is going to be one more gradient, and what this is going to do is it's going to apply a darkening to the edges of the eye, or at least that's how it's intended to work. So let's open this guy up, and let's bring you into the middle again, and let's add in an extra stop. Set this one to black. And now you can see that we've really darkened it up. This is a little bit too much, so let's add in a second stop, and let's expand that middle section. Let's bring that guy all the way up to complete white, and change the interpolation back to cubic. And now, this just gives a little bit of blending to the black at the very edges of our eye to make it look a little bit more realistic, to blend in with the cells a little bit more. And there you have a fairly decent eye. And you can do this with as many eyes as you want. In fact, let's go back, let's edit that color a little bit. We bring that down a little bit. But yeah, so you get the idea. Just by swapping around the gradients, you can change the look of your eye. You can change the inner ring highlight by adjusting the multiply and the dodge additions. And yeah. Now, the reflection on the cornea is not perfect. I'm sort of faking it based on the position of the light and the view direction. Godot at the moment does not have a good glass shader, which is what I wanted. So this is sort of the next best. Hopefully in the future, Godot will have a better glass shader and we can replace the cornea with something better. But for now, this will work. And it can give you a very realistic and very adjustable eye for your models. And that's how you can use the eyeball shader in your projects. I'm going to be posting this on GitHub and the Godot asset library, so you can find it there. The GitHub page will also contain an example project, so you can play around with it if you'd like. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and here's looking at you.